Hello everyone, welcome to the Recruiters Hangout. Thank you for joining us. We've got a great hangout today. We've got Greg Savage who's come back to join us again. Thank you, Greg, for being here. We are discussing today why are we recruiters still ballsing up recruiting basics for candidates and losing revenue. So that's our topic today. If you want to join in with this discussion, if you hear anything from Greg or any of our hosts, have any questions, please tweet RecHangout, hashtag RecHangout on Twitter. We're keeping an eye on that. Also, you can, if you're joining us via Webinar Jam, you've got the Webinar Jam chat box on your screen to the right, so you can chat in there, post your comments and questions. We'll be keeping a lookout for you. Alan Whitford is our host today. We've got Louise Triance from UK Recruiter, Mark Stevens from Smart Recruiter as well. I'm Louis Welcomme from Colleagues Software. Thank you for joining us. Alan, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Louis, and welcome, Greg, and great to have you on the show again. And Mark and Louis, great to be here again with you guys. And Louise is going to be with us doing our monitoring of that Twitter sphere. So make sure you get your questions into her. The theme today about ballsing it up with candidates is almost going to make Greg and I sound like the grumpy old men of recruitment that I remember back in the day when we used to do it right. And we didn't mean it to come across that way. But we do have more years experience between us than we probably want to think about. And one of the key things, if you've ever had a chance to read what Greg talks about, read his blog, The Savage Truth. I'm going to promote you, Greg, even if you won't. But we got a lot of things to cover today about what's right and what's wrong about recruitment. But the whole theme really is, how are we going to help you guys get it right? How are we going to help you make more money? Greg, so maybe that a lot of our audience knows who I am, but they might not know who you are. So who are you, Greg?
Well, thank you very much again for having me on your Hangout. Clearly, the Hangout has reached the end of its budget because now you are resorting to an unemployed ex-recruiter from Australia to entertain your listeners. But I wasn't always unemployed. I've been a recruiter involved in recruitment for 35 years. Highlights would be starting a company that we built to 250 people and listed on the stock exchange. So that was very exciting. That was a good 15 years ago. And more recently, running Aquint outside of the US, which was 35 offices across the world. And then we did a management buyout with a company called Firebrand, which was 10 offices in 8 countries, and I sold that about a couple of years ago. So now I'm working, when I do work, as an advisor to recruitment companies. I'm on the board of 12 recruitment companies in Australia and New Zealand. That keeps me very busy, but it's also a privilege, Alan, because you find that you're learning as much as you're contributing from what these companies are doing. And I speak at recruiting conferences in a lot of places, including the UK. So I guess it does allow me to sort of look in. I've got a lot of experience, like all of us on this call, but I can look at what other people are doing, things they're doing well, mistakes they're making, and it's from that I draw most of my ideas.
I think that's great, Greg. Thank you for that background. Let's kind of we'll touch briefly on what you wrote last week about the dark ages of recruitment. But when I reread that, I thought, okay, yeah, I'm from that era too, and we can laugh all we want about 3x5 cards was our database. And I was the first mobile recruiter. I used 2p coins and went to a call box on Regent Street, and that was mobile recruitment. We can have a bit of a fun with that, but I think what came to me when I really read through the article is that there was some underlying themes of just good, sound recruitment practice. Things from having a qualified job order to really getting to know your candidate to actually building a true relationship with your customer. That seemed to me to be the theme that was coming through that I don't know, maybe a lot of recruitment companies today and individual recruiters, they haven't had that training and that experience, and they seem to just go straight to the mobile phone and the database, and they've missed that step of what were sound recruiting practices. Does that kind of underline some of the stuff you're seeing out there?
Yeah, definitely. Look, I think, give it a bit of context. I personally believe that the recruitment industry is in for an excellent future. I think there's brilliant opportunities. I'm investing in recruitment companies. So strongly do I feel about the future of recruitment. But not everybody is going to ride that wave. A lot of recruiters are going to fail. And the reason they're going to fail is that I think the future of recruitment, especially when it comes to candidates, is about highly evolved technology. We need great technology. We'll talk about that later in this session, no doubt. But it also depends on very sophisticated human influencing skills. What I've noticed has been lost, and this is coming to your point, mate, is that recruiters, and I'm generalizing this, I'm brilliant recruiters, but as a generalization, a lot of recruiters either never had or have lost the skill to influence the outcome of the interactions. And that's the beauty of our business. Not only is that the beauty, that's the part that clients will pay us for. You know, identifying a candidate on the internet is becoming easier and easier. Technology, my 13-year-old son will do that. He'll find anything on the internet. You guys don't even know what that boy can find on the internet. But can he influence a candidate to turn down a counteroffer? Can he influence somebody to go for an interview when they're not that keen on it? Can he influence a client to massage the job description? That's the human influencing skill. And that's what that blog was about largely. It was about go back to some of those things. You know, qualifying a job order, certainly, all those client skills, but also the candidate skills. I mean, I actually saw someone, I spent a lot of time in recruitment companies. I saw somebody the other day, I was looking over her shoulder. She was typing an 8-paragraph email to a candidate to try to convince them to go on an interview. And I said, what is this person in Timbuktu or somewhere? Why can't we speak to them? And she looked at me as though I was from another age, which I guess I am. But she needed to speak to that person, and that conversation would have given the outcome. So I think it's those, yes, Alan, those old skills, they've either been lost, as I said, or they were never there. And if you like, let's think about something simple like phone sourcing. I see recruiters sending thousands of in-mails, and then they say to me, no one's responding to my in-mails. It's impossible to headhunt these people. And when I suggest pick up the phone, which I did to a young woman the other day, she said to me, oh, but Greg, they don't list their phone number on their LinkedIn profile. I mean, you know, is it that hard to find someone's phone number if you know where they work? It's not actually that hard, but people are not doing these basic things. So yes, I'm frustrated about a number of things which recruiters are missing the boat on, and one of them is maximizing our influencing skills through the telephone and face-to-face. Absolutely. I think it's a big gap.
So Greg, do you think that's more a symptom of Gen Y, the millennials, Gen Z, whatever gen we're in now, that they do spend an awful lot of time like this and very little time like this, so they don't even have the normal people skills of having that kind of communication, rather than that, or is it, well, you know, I know that's a simplified answer, but you know, we've got great trainers like Roy Ripper, who's been on our show, that are trying to train people to do those recruitment skills. But is there a disconnect in terms of there's a couple generations in the workplace now who just don't have that skill to begin with?
You know, generational differences are largely hyped, in my opinion. Of course, there's some truth in some generational differences, absolutely, because of the technology. And it is true that the younger generation are more inclined to want to text something. But let me tell you, there are old hands who are just as guilty of this. And the reason for that is we've been seduced into believing that technology is better. And not only that, technology allows us to be cowards, right? It's much easier to email somebody with 2 resumes attached and hope that they're going to come back to us with 2 interviews, rather than call that client and overcome that client's negativity about us calling them, talk them through and sell the candidate over the phone. That is an anxiety-provoking, heart-pumping experience for most people. Of course, that's where the beauty of this job is. When you have success at it, it's overcoming those things. But people have been seduced into thinking that digital is better. Digital is better in many things, but not in everything. If you're trying to convince someone to go for an interview, if you're trying to convince a client to broaden their job description, if you're trying to work somebody through a counteroffer scenario, digital is not better. And there are plenty of recruiters who were around in the dark ages or at the closing ends of it. I shouldn't have come up with that term because in some ways they were the enlightened ages. But in the time before as much technology as we have now, and they too have fallen into patterns of defaulting to email and text and everything else. There's a place for it. Obviously, there's a place for it. I'm not a dinosaur. I've used emails. I mean, I'm probably ahead of technology than most people, actually, half my age. But you've got to be smart about using what medium is the most effective. That wasn't grammatical, but using the right medium to get the outcome you want. And where influence is important, you never influence somebody with an email. You never influence somebody with a few paragraphs. You've got to eyeball them, or at the very least hear the tone of their voice and let them hear yours. So it's a missed opportunity, and it's not only because of generation.
So can I just chip in there? So is this the responsibility of the individual to get their head around the best methods for engaging with candidates, or should business owners and the team leaders within sales organisations be taking more responsibility and identifying where this is happening and helping to influence the way that the recruiters are engaging with candidates then, Greg?
Yeah, it's a great question, Mark, and I would, having been an owner and a manager all my life, I would aim the responsibility very squarely at owners and managers and team leaders to coach, to train, to encourage, to show, and to be brave themselves and actually do some of this and lead by example. And that is a courageous thing to do, because people can hear you, and sometimes it goes belly up. It doesn't always go well, these conversations, but I think it's about training, it's about educating, it's about giving confidence, it's about showing that it works, and it's teaching. It's teaching which method of communication is the most effective, depending on what the outcome is that you're trying to achieve.
So I think you're right about that communication piece, Greg. We talked about that. We now have 5 generations in the workplace. I mean, you and I aren't retiring anytime soon, so it soon could be 6 generations in the workplace when my niece joins. And all of us have different levels of communication. Like you, I consider myself one of the youngest Gen Y guys I know, because I've been using all the technology for 20 years now or more. But at the same time, I think I'm one of the people who ruined it for recruiters, because I was at the forefront of applicant tracking technology systems for corporates. I helped lead the job board revolution. And in one sense, and we used to talk about when the job boards really started taking off, that we've just basically ruined certain amounts of recruitment, because the recruiters didn't have to source candidates. They could just post on a job board, post and pray. And we put ATSs into the corporate, so they didn't have to talk to their recruiters anymore, because everything had to come in through their website. So not only have the recruiters lost that ability to have that intelligent conversation, our clients have too, because now they've just been relying on everything to go via their system. And the last thing they want to do is actually talk to a recruiter. So
yeah,
maybe training needs to go.
That's going to all be shaken up, and I'm very happy to tell you that. And it's happening in the UK, or the conditions are right in the UK. And what's going to shake all that up are cataclysmic, severe, niche talent shortages, and bloody fantastic for that, because what you just said, Alan, about job boards and even LinkedIn. Right, all these things, and internal teams, and clients not talking to recruiters. That's fine when the recruitment job is a screening function, when you've got so many candidates and all you want is screening. But when there are no candidates, which is what's going to emerge and is emerging in the UK, when I say no candidates, we all realize you can have high unemployment and massive skill shortages at the same time, which is what we've got in Australia. Last week, Seek announced the highest ever number of jobs on their site. That's our job board. At the same week that the Australian government announced our unemployment's the highest level for 13 years. And the reason for that is that, quite simply, the jobs that are available, or rather the people that are available, don't have the skills for the jobs that are available. And what that's going to mean is that the wheel is turning. And now, and this is so important for recruiters, and this is my real message for today, if anyone wants to hear it, is that recruiters have got to learn the skills to engage with people who are not going to come to them. Any recruitment function, be it in-house or be it agency, that relies on proactive applications from candidates. In other words, they wait for candidates to apply. Any function that relies on that, which many do, is destined to fail. Right? We've got to completely rethink our definition of what a candidate is. And it's going to run a truck through some of these entrenched barriers that are in place between clients and candidates, because clients, talent is the epicenter of competitive advantage. Companies are not going to, right across the board, are not going to be able to achieve their corporate goals unless they get the best candidates. And they're going to need to use recruiters if recruiters become world champions at accessing talent. That's our mission. We've got to become world champions at accessing talent, and those candidates are not going to come to us. And the sorts of things you mentioned, like job boards, are going to become increasingly ineffective. They already are. LinkedIn is becoming increasingly ineffective. I can discuss with you why I think that. And recruitment companies' databases, I mean, they're so proud of their databases, but most recruitment company databases are a bloody candidate graveyard. You know, only 10% of the candidates in there do they ever engage with. So those old tactics, I'm not saying dump them, they still work to a degree, but they're not going to be enough to give you candidates that your clients can't find themselves. And clients are only going to pay us if we can find candidates they can't find themselves. And candidates off job boards and candidates that are easily findable at LinkedIn, on LinkedIn, are not candidates that they'll pay us for. So that's, I can talk a lot about what I think about that, but that's what I think we've got to start talking to recruiters about. And I read from my friends in the UK that, you know, they tell me the market's booming, and Rec puts out these stats that clients are putting more job orders out there, but we're not actually filling many more jobs because we haven't got to grips with the real competitive advantage in recruitment, and it's all about candidates. It is all about candidates. That's where we should be putting our energies.
Well, that's why I've always hated the phrase "war for talent." I used to have a colleague, it was at Nortel in those days, and he said, well, the day after the war for talent became a key phrase, it was over because the candidates had already won, because we're always trying to find better candidates, the best candidates, so the candidate's always in the driving seat. And as you're saying now, I think it's going to be more of a challenge. If you're in public sector, for example, here in the UK, the time bomb that you have is that your generation that's been the core of public sector works in the UK is all coming up for retirement, and there just isn't any backfill. And I had a conversation with a guy from one of the local councils last week, and he said we're absolutely petrified because we're going to lose a third of our workforce in the next 5 years, and we see no replacements in sight.
So well, just pick up a couple of things that you said there. You mentioned the phrase "war for talent." That is absolute nonsense. There's no war for talent. It's the wrong word. It's the wrong imagery. It is a seduction of talent. It's a romance. These are the phrases. That's the language I use, because what recruiters have got to get better at is engage. And this is where we've got to talk in a moment about CRM and about the fact that recruitment is merging with marketing, because candidates behave like consumers when they look for jobs. So it's a romance. It's a seduction. It's not a war. So that's such old thinking. You know, it makes me smile. The other thing, just picking up your point, I was talking to a guy called, I forgot his name because I'm old, but he's the CEO of Job Science in the US. And he told me that he has seen research that says that in the US, 10,000 baby boomers are retiring every day. Every day. Now, some younger people on this call might say, well, so what if baby boomers are retiring? It's about time we got rid of those wrinklies. But in actual fact, that's a massive skills drain. At the same time, the jobs that are being created, there are many jobs being created, even in Firebrand, the company I sold a couple of years ago. In 2012, 50% of the jobs we filled in that company, which was in digital marketing, 50% of those jobs had job titles that didn't exist 3 years prior. So think about that. Half the jobs were new. So where are these candidates going to come from? And so if we rely on these old tactics, these worn-out tactics like our database, we've got to use our database with CRM to engage and build talent communities. That is true. But things like job boards aren't going away. I'm not saying they're ineffective. I'm saying they're becoming increasingly ineffective to find candidates that clients will pay us for. And most recruitment companies are not thinking like that. They're competing for the same small pool of candidates that clients can access themselves. We actually have to get so smart that we know when someone is going to change jobs before they've acted. And I can talk a bit about that if you want me to, but that is the future of talent acquisition, Alan.
I think it's interesting, Greg, that the recruitment marketplace is divided into two when it comes to recruiting staff. One part that is going to be catered for by the job boards and by the social media channels, and then this other part that you're referring to, the rare skills, the in-demand skills that we actually have to physically go and nurture and lure away from their current employers. I was listening to something you said right at the start, where even your son could go and find the candidates, and then Alan mentioned something later on in his conversation. He said that candidates actually don't want to speak to recruiters, and they're the candidates that recruiters want to engage with. And this probably brings us back to the actual theme of this conversation today, which is how we're ballsing it up. And perhaps one of the most important topics of this conversation is, how do we engage with that candidate the first time that we pick up the phone to them? Now, I mean, I run a business. I despair when I hear people using phrases like, "I've just found your CV on a job board or on LinkedIn," or "Are you still looking for a job?" These are the most common mistakes that basic recruiters, people new to the industry, make. But experienced recruiters need to get far more tactical, and I'd be really interested to hear your advice on the sort of the engagement tactics that you encourage people to adopt to make these candidates believe that there's a value in talking to us, so that we can start to understand what their requirements are to even consider making a move in the first instance.
Right. Great question. So there's two angles to this. The first I'm just going to touch on and then suggest we come back to later. I use the word seduction. And if you think of that in the romantic sense, the seduction is a slow, sophisticated process. You're talking about recruiters who are walking up to people and saying, fancy a kiss. They're just being absolutely, brutally blunt, which is not going to work in the social sense or in the recruitment sense. So on the seduction side, there's the whole digital seduction, and I do want to talk about CRM. I want to talk about social media and how to use that properly in building a brand and a community, which recruiters can do. But if you're talking about actually the one-on-one approach, you are right, Mark. I've heard all those things myself. And the first thing is that if someone is making a phone approach, you've got to use, in my view, very subtle language. And the first thing is, the big mistake recruiters make is when they get someone on the phone that they think they found them on LinkedIn, or they're trying to headhunt them, they try to sell them a job. Now, if you are approaching somebody who is not looking for a job, the first thing you shouldn't do is try and sell them a job. It's counterintuitive, I know, but I'm sitting at my desk doing my work. I'm not looking. Phone goes, "Hi, Greg, I've got a great job for you." My response is, "I'm not looking for a job. Please, you're wasting my time. I'm busy." So what do? Well, what we need to teach recruiters to do is to engage with those people and talk to them about setting a time for a chat about their career. And so the conversation, I'll wing it, the conversation will go something like, "Mark, the reason I'm calling you is that I notice that you've been in legal, you're a lawyer and you've been in your position for 5 years. Your name has come to me several times as a highly recommended person. Now, what I'd like to talk to you about is, you may not know that the market has changed a lot in 5 years. New employers have emerged, salaries have changed, and the reason I'm calling you today is I'd like to set a time for us to have a conversation about your career. Now, we could do that now if that suits, but it may not be the right time. We could do it at 5 o'clock tonight. I'll have a coffee with you, but I'd love to talk to you about what's happening in the market in your career." That wasn't very well done, I'll grant you that, but I'm making it up as I go along. That kind of interaction is far more likely to get someone to say, who's not interested in talking about their career? Everybody is. But if you say to someone, "I've got a great job for you," it's too pushy, it's not a seduction. It's too pushy, too aggressive. It's not what they're looking for. So if it's a true passive candidate. So I think you're right. We need to teach people about that, but we also need to teach people about building a community of people that know them through their brand and are therefore happy to hear from them. They have a warm feeling to hear from them. And if you're in a niche, you can do that. So that's something we can talk about as well.
Does this come back to things like, do you remember the old spin techniques we used in sales? Find out what the other person wants, find out what their pains are, and then sell it back to them. So in the same sort of way you could do this with a candidate. I'm here to consult with you about your career, find out what it would take for them to consider, and then match that to your requirement so that you actually sell them something they actually feel that they might want to pursue.
Yeah, look, I think that's probably selling 101, isn't it? And I think it applies when you are calling somebody to headhunt them. You're not selling a job; you're selling your credibility. That's the first thing you're doing. And recruiters, most recruiters skip that step and then wonder why they don't get any engagement. You've got to sell your credibility, and it's a seduction. You know, it's a romance. I know I use those words, but it is like that. You can't just pick up the phone and say, "I've got a job for you. Come around, let's talk about it."
Great.
So that's very important. Yeah.
Greg, that seduction then I assume starts going back to the CRM, back to technology in the digital sphere, laying the foundations for your brand or your personal brand, being engage people around what they're interested in, content, marketing. The idea of a recruiter becoming a marketing person is or the salesperson becoming a marketing person is a repeated conversation we've had many times over the last year. Is that where technology steps in, laying the foundation for that conversation? When you do pick up the phone, that person may already know you or know of you or know that you're ringing about maybe something you both have an interest in, maybe some content that they've seen, rather than selling a job straight off from a cold position.
Yeah, the technology part is many faceted. Okay, so we've got to look at it, and they are interrelated. Certainly, I think that if you were any recruitment company who's in any kind of niche or specialization, and I'll say this quite bluntly, and who employ more than 8 people, their next hire needs to be a digital marketing specialist, not another consultant. And then they need a strategy that they need to execute, because what you need to do is to build up a community of people that is engaging. And I know there's a lot of people who talk about this, but there's not many people who've actually done it. And I've done it twice with Firebrand. And the savage truth is a massive community in this country and in other countries. I go to the UK to speak, and the bloody place is sold out. How can that be? Who am I? I'm nobody with nothing special, and I've got no mailing list in the UK. But it's because of a social content strategy. And it's the reason why so many recruiters do not engage in this. There's several reasons. One is they don't understand it, but 2 is it's a long game. Our industry is so predicated on, short term. How many interviews have you arranged today? How many client visits have you got this week? What's your fees for this month? My God, I've said those phrases more than anyone on this phone call, I can assure you. And it's very short term. Whereas building a social strategy is long term. It's a slow, long game. But it's essential, because your digital footprint, I believe, is becoming, if you do it well, becoming more valuable than your database, because you're engaging with people continuously. It will lead to inbound calls, and we have a lot of experience of that. When you look at Firebrand's digital footprint, they've got, I don't work there, I've sold the business 2 years ago. I've got no association with it except to friends who work there. But they've got 45,000 Twitter followers. They get 500,000 people a year reading their blog. This is a company of 30 staff, right? So they haven't got big resources, but 60% of their candidates come to them through their social platforms. And their consultants are often calling up people and saying, hey, this is Betty from Firebrand, and there is a recognition. Yes, I subscribe to your blog, yes. Yes, it's in a niche. It'd be hard to do this if you were perhaps a deco or something, but if you're in a niche, you need to do it. So that's one aspect. The second aspect, which is so underutilized, is the use of CRM to really engage with candidates. There's so few, my wine shop sends me emails reminding me that my Shiraz would have run out. My coffee shop has a customer loyalty program. These are unsophisticated organizations that do more to engage with their customers than big recruitment companies do. And there's many, many things we could do. I mean, you guys are technology guys, some of you, more than I do. But we should really allow candidates to come in and update their data in real time. We should have automated marketing to be engaging with people, right? So I said, here's the thing that I think is, I mean, I made it up, so I think it's the most important thing about dealing with candidates, and that is for all our my history, we've advertised and we've tried to catch candidates' attention. You know, we put ads and years ago we used to have billboards and all that kind of stuff to attract their attention in the hope they'll apply for a job. That is history. What we've got to do now is we have to engage with them so we know their intention, what they're going to do. And you might say that sounds crazy, but you know, it happens to us every day. You put a status update on Facebook, says you're going to Bali for a holiday. The next day on Facebook there'll be ads for hotels and massages in Bali. They know what you're doing because you've told them. We can do that in recruitment. We can do that through social and through CRM. We can have trigger emails that go out when people change things on their status. We can have a 6-month email saying, hey, come in for a coffee, and keep on engaging with people. So the trick about candidate acquisition is what we've got to do is we've got to start to engage with people before they start their job search. So many recruiters fail to understand that if they get a candidate off a job board, right, this is obvious, but sometimes somebody needs to say it. If you get a candidate off a job board, there is every chance on God's green earth that that candidate is with 4 other agencies and is applying for jobs direct with employers. That means your chances of placing that person are infinitesimally low. And yet people put all their energy into these great candidates, knowing full well that those candidates are interviewing and going all around town with somebody else. What we need to do is try and get hold of people when they've made the decision to move, or prior to making the decision to move, and we act as their agent and represent them in the marketplace. And that means we've got to use CRM, we've got to use social, we've got to use a number of tools that's where the technology is so important. Now, this conversation started off with Alan talking about old school skills, and he is right. When I wrote that blog, I built, there's hardly anyone more old school than me at one level. But we've got to use technology effectively. The future of recruitment is where technology meets human influence, and it's those two things. That's what I think, Louis.
Yeah, so the CRM technology, 2 aspects: engagement, marketing technology, that's what it's going to become, and data intelligence, being able to predict things, being able to prioritize. That's what's happening in the marketplace outside of recruitment. So.
Exactly. We've got to accept that candidates are looking. Let's think about candidate behavior for a moment. Candidates are looking for jobs like consumers buy products. Right? Candidates are searching on Twitter to see what people are saying about prospective employers. They're going to Glassdoor and other review sites, and they're assessing recruiters. And candidates' behavior has changed. You know, the candidate experience on a job board is a poor one. Right? There is job board fatigue setting in. They hate it. Recruiters hate job boards because they get flooded with irrelevant candidates. You know, and candidates hate job boards, dislike job boards often because they don't get a reply, they get jerked around, they get form emails sent back to them, and they see the same job advertised 12 times by different recruiters. It's not a good experience. And as a result, you know, this is a simple thing, and you're a technology guy, so you'll appreciate it. Google tells us that they're getting up to 1 million searches a month for jobs on Google. And what that means is instead of going to a job board, a candidate is going to Google and just simply entering accounting job North London, $60,000. Now, the question that I would ask any recruiter who's listening to this, if that's what candidates are doing, what are you doing to make sure that when that Google search comes up, your name is in the top 3 on that list? And when I ask that of recruiters and owners of recruitment companies, they look at me as though I'm speaking kanji Japanese. It's like I'm speaking another language. And yet it's so obvious that people are going into search engines like Google and others and entering jobs. And what are they doing about making sure what are recruiters doing about making sure their SEO makes their company name or their individual name come up on the front page of Google? That's about content, that's about social, that's about SEO. So technology is important, it's becoming sophisticated. And the irony, and I'll take a breath now to give someone else a turn, but the irony is, the sad irony, I said earlier, I believe in the future of recruitment. I think there's brilliant opportunities. But to do that, we have to become very sophisticated in the use of of technology, and most recruiters are not. And we have to become very sophisticated in the art, the craft of influence, which most recruiters are not. So they're losing on both fronts. That's the problem.
All right, I'm going to give you a break, Greg, for 1 second, just do a bit of a restart. For everybody that is listening already, we've been talking with Greg Savage, author of The Savage Truth and recruiter extraordinaire from Down Under. And hopefully a few of your colleagues in Down Under and Kiwi Land are actually watching this as well. This is hashtag RecHangout on Twitter if you want to get some comments in. We've had a lot of great comments from people out there. And a shout out to a few of you that have, Etty, Melanie, Akshat, Harriet, Louise, Tamara, and a few others have all made comments. Peter and James, you'll all know who you are. Thank you for your comments. And mostly, Greg, the comments have been quite supportive about, get on the phone, talk to people, don't ask those stupid old world questions. So I think we're hitting on the right theme there from that perspective. I want to hark back to one of the things that you mentioned, and I think it's an interesting thought, where candidates need an agent because they're confused. They need someone to help them get a job. Has the recruitment industry, have we lost that in terms of, oh, you know what, we actually are just like a movie agent or a rock or a musician's agent where we're supposed to help the candidate? Have we lost that sort of part of that romance and that interaction you talk about? Have we lost that ability as recruiters to really function as a proper agent for the candidate?
For the most part, the answer to that is most recruiters never had that ability. And because of the dumbing down of the recruitment industry, because of technology, because of internal teams, because of multi-listed job orders, because of dropping margins, and the fact that a lot of recruitment over the last 10 years has become a resume race, very few recruiters do what you describe. But I do believe that is the way of the future. But you can only act as someone's agent if you have an exclusive relationship with them. That's the part. You can't act as someone's agent if you can't have 6 people. I'm quite sure that all these footballers and other people don't have 6 agents working on their behalf, because that would be chaos. And that comes back to my point that you have to engage with people early in, there's so many recruiters who waste the data and the relationships that they've built up. If we deal with a candidate and we don't place them, they get tagged maybe and they get put into a database, and what happens then? They might get sent a newsletter once every 3 years. We've got to be thinking that person will move. We've got to keep in touch with them. We've got to have a coffee with them. It amazes me. Here's the thing. Any owner of a recruitment company that I've ever spoken to would be absolutely delighted if they saw one of their consultants leaving the office to go and see a company, even if that company was not recruiting. They would say, no, that's a marketing visit. That's a good investment of your time. You go and see that company, you engage with that employer, and then when they're recruiting, they will use you. No owner of a recruitment company would stop their staff doing that. In fact, they task them with doing it, give them KPIs to go and do that. But if that recruiter was leaving the office and he said, I'm just going to go and see a candidate who has no intention of leaving his job, the owner would say, get back to your desk. You're wasting your time. It doesn't make sense. That is the investment we should be making. And that's how you can have an agent relationship with someone, if you invest in them when they're not looking, so that when they do look, they come to you as their partner. And it goes back to the way we reward recruiters, the way we manage them, the way we KPI them. We have to take a longer view on candidate acquisition, in my opinion.
So if we go back to that thing, Greg, and to me this is a little bit of the old school approach. When you and I would get a good candidate come in and sit down at our desk, we wouldn't let him go. And maybe that's part of it, is that we used to have the candidates come in and sit down at our desk. And because they saw our ad in the New York Times or the Sydney Herald or wherever they saw it, and they come and saw us, and we wouldn't let them go until we're on the phone, talk to some companies, and now Bob, take your resume or your CV and go right down, get on the subway and go down there for your interview. And we acted as our agent because they came to us, and then we wanted to hold on to them, because marketing the candidate, that was our product, and we needed to make sure of it. And I think that's one of the tech has given us is when you sit down with your companies you go and consult to, how many of the recruiters actually have the candidates come in and sit down and spend an hour with them, either in the office or out at Starbucks or wherever? Are they forming that relationship with the candidate?
Well, the whole candidate screening, interviewing process has been cut down because it's become such a resume race, and because it's become such a numbers game. And that is to the detriment of absolutely everyone. I mean, a lot of things that happen in recruitment are to the detriment of everyone. Multi-listed job orders in competition are not in the interests of clients, candidates, or recruiters. But, you know, the point you make about sitting a candidate down and getting them out in interviews, I'd love to see recruiters doing that more. I know it's not that easy these days, but I'd love to see them doing it more. But let's just take a step back from that. How few recruiters are skilled enough when they've met a candidate to even ask where that candidate is up to in their job search. You know, I do this all the time. I say, that candidate, well, who's your best candidate in such and such a category? They give me a name. I say, is that person with other recruitment companies? I don't know, the recruiter says. They haven't even asked that question, let alone evolve to the point of engaging in a conversation with that candidate to say, let me represent you for a week exclusively. I've got 10 employers I can represent you to. Let me go through those with you now. Give me the permission to represent you. You don't go anywhere else. You go back to the office or take a week off. I will represent you. I want to hear those sorts of conversations. And that speaks to your acting as an agent. But it's not happening very often. Of course, there'll be recruiters listening to me here who do that. There are recruiters who do that. But the vast majority, once they get a good candidate, they just want to go to the default mode of spamming them around town. Speed over quality. That is a slippery slope to recruiting hell. It's not going to work anymore.
No, I think you're right, and we're getting some good comments in from the audience supporting that. Damon, emails don't create relationships. Zora, I think building relationships with candidates is the key to recruitment, meeting the candidates, keeping in touch. And Nigel and Nate, same thing. Go where your niche is. Go where the candidates hanging out to talk shop. And Ati, I think it's quite a good comment. It's surreal that recruitment is so behind the marketing curve when even small businesses have embraced the principles of customer-centric marketing. And
that's a smart comment by Ati.
Yeah.
It is absurd. It is absurd. I mean, recruiters. Look, this is an in-house conversation. I've been a recruiter for 35 years. I love recruitment. It's given me everything in my life. I love everything about it. So I feel that I'm okay to criticize. And I do criticize the lack of innovation and the lack of longer-term investment. Even if you look at most recruitment companies' so-called social strategy, it's about putting pictures of their staff on Facebook with a birthday cake or running job ads on Twitter. You know, it is really about time that owners of recruitment companies took a good hard look at themselves and at their business and said, we are going to invest. Don't go and hire another average recruiter. Hire a digital marketing person to build you. You can be very simple about it. You know, it's just about good content. It's about engagement. It's about building Twitter following. You know, anyone who's half smart can teach you how to do that. And then it's about persistence and discipline and doing it over the long term. And that is just the lowest thing you can do to at least build another channel of access to candidates. I mean, things like job boards, as I said, are going to become less effective. I've got no faith in LinkedIn whatsoever. Of course, use it, rape and pillage as much as you can. Take the best candidates out of it while it's there. But I've got no faith that that's the future of recruitment. I've got no faith that it's even going to contain the best candidates going forward. People are getting off LinkedIn because they're getting spammed so much. I even had an HR director the other day say to me that, he said to me, looked sadly at me. I think I said this in my blog and said that, you're a recruiter. You must be very unhappy because LinkedIn's going to wipe out your industry. You know, like when is that going to happen? They've been there 12 years. I mean, going on LinkedIn makes you a recruiter in roughly the same way that going into a garage makes you a car. You know, you're not a recruiter just because you're on LinkedIn. You know, LinkedIn identifies human beings recruit. It's a nuanced, sophisticated skill which we need to get back to. Alan?
Well, and it's I'll talk about this often in one of my slides when I look at the future of recruitment. There's always going to be this ... is going to, you know, ruin recruitment agencies or take out the industry. It was going to be ATSs, it was going to be job boards, it was going to be announced recruitment, it was going to be LinkedIn, it was going to be whatever this week's flavor is going to ruin the recruitment industry. And you're right, the recruitment industry is still growing. It's still stronger. And you're right about REC putting out, amazing stats every week. But I would also go back to what you mentioned earlier, and it goes a bit to what Eddie said too. And years ago, I was working within a recruitment advertising business, and we worked the whole theme of the candidate as a consumer, the consumer as a candidate, and tried to apply proper marketing approaches to both campaign management, the candidate management, the whole piece, but treating it like consumer marketing. And we were struggling like heck to get clients to buy into that, because they kept going, no. That's what our marketing team does, but we're recruiting. And when I talked to my brother-in-law, who was running one of the largest publishing businesses in the U.S. at the time, and he's totally data-driven, and like you said with your earlier example, your coffee shop, your pizza place, everybody knows more about you. Mitch is going, I've got all this data that I use to target down to the smallest niche when I'm about to sell a $140,000 ad in Vogue. He said, you've got more data than I've ever dreamed of having, very personal data, and you guys don't use it. There's a disconnect there about us as marketeers, and Mark had mentioned that before he left about, where are we as marketeers? We don't use that data, and it isn't necessarily even the big data, I'll call it the small data, that really tells us about those candidates. We should have an understanding of that and be able to use that more about becoming their agent, their trusted source.
Agree 100% with that, Alan, and if you think about, I'm not a data scientist by any stretch of the imagination, but if you think about the amount of data we collect on candidates and our ability to engage with them if we set out to do so through automated marketing and a whole range of other things that we could do. And there's a recruitment company in Australia that's about to launch, I'm a little bit on the inside so I can't sort of reveal, but about to launch something along the lines of what we're talking about. And I'm delighted to see that. But don't forget, when I talk about data and when I talk about CRM and when I talk about technology, I think it's important, and I explain why, but equally important is the recruiter's ability to go back to those influencing skills. And I think it's going to play into recruiters' hands, because the irony of LinkedIn is that it makes so much data available that it has actually, I think, made the recruitment process less efficient. LinkedIn was sort of set out to make it more efficient. It's made it less efficient because the data is so freely available. Getting the data is not going to give you a differentiated advantage. Knowing that candidate works at that company, it's engaging with them. It's getting hold of them. It's having a conversation with them, getting them to go. It's managing the process. It's getting them to accept the job when it gets offered and manage the counter offer. That is what clients are going to pay us for. Two things. They're going to pay us for two things. Finding candidates they can't find themselves, which sounds obvious, but that means not candidates off job boards, not candidates freely available on LinkedIn. That's the first thing they'll pay us for. And the second thing is to manage the process. And that's the craft. And I've said it before, but I think recruiters are shallow in both those areas. But the ones who get it right will make more money and have better careers in the future than even we had in our past, Alan. I think it's a great future for some recruiters if they get it right.
Well, I think you're right. I got a good comment from Peter talking about behavioral economics taught us about the illusion of choice. And his point is, if you're searching for a candidate or if you're searching for a job, you don't want 200 results. You want 5 to 10, but the right 5 to 10. So it's not about casting the net wide, because that almost feels like laziness. I think he's got a good point there. And I love this comment from Mike. Maybe candidates would get a better service from their agent if they paid them. That's how it works in other industries, and why the agent gets a cut of their salary if you're a footballer or a rock star or an actor. So if we paid our agents, would they actually give us better service? And would we be more inclined to be loyal, because then we would have that one-on-one relationship. I know that opens up a very strange debate, but it's an interesting thought.
Yeah, look, it's an interesting thought, but you've got to take it to its logical conclusion. If you get a candidate exclusively, and that candidate, you know your market well enough, and that candidate has in-demand skills, your chances of placing that candidate goes from 1 in 10 to 9 in 10, so you will get paid. I mean, who cares who pays us as long as we get paid? So if you're acting as an agent for candidates that are not freely available on the market, you'll make more money than anyone else. And that's It's an obvious thing. That's what clients pay us for, right? Finding candidates they can't find themselves. They don't want to use us. We are a grudge purchase at the best of times. And that's why they build all these internal teams. But fortunately for us, many of these internal teams are becoming less effective because those internal recruiters have no extra skills, for the most part, that agency recruiters have. They're being caught in the same trap. And they used to just throw ads on job boards and be able to fill jobs. That's not going to be successful anymore. So it's an interesting dynamic, and that's why I'm so enthused about our industry, because it's pendulum swinging back our way. But we have to do things differently. We can't be living in the past and recruiting 1999 style. We just can't do that anymore.
Well, I think you made an interesting point. I think there's two buying pieces. If I look at it from the internal recruiter, one is the grudge. Oh God, last resort, I need to use a recruitment agent. The people from Heck or whatever are going to come in and work for us. The flip side of that, and I've been into a lot of companies, I'm sure you have as well, where it's just out and out either laziness or, not just laziness. We don't have the people in our business that know how to recruit directly, so we just can't be bothered about it. Or we're in such a, we run our business by manpower headcount. I couldn't possibly hire 3 or 4 recruiters because that would add to my headcount, and I can't do that. So I'm just going to do everything by agencies and not thinking about the cost implication or the service implication at all. So in one sense, recruitment is in a very healthy place from an agency perspective, because as much as I've been battering on and on for the last 10 years about in-house should be doing a much better job themselves, there's not a lot of evidence other than some shining examples that it's happening on a regular basis. So.
There are some in-house teams who are superb, and they're doing a lot of the things I'm talking about, like building communities, using CRM. But remember that, and I speak at a lot of conferences, and they're not all recruit. Some of them are HR conferences, and I sit in the audience sometimes. And I've heard so many heads of in-house teams, HR directors, talent directors, smugly quoting how much money they've saved on recruiter fees. We saved $10 million on recruiter fees last year, and that's all well and good, and it's true. It has happened, and it's hurt our industry to a degree. But increasingly, I'm beginning to hear line managers saying, yes, but what about the quality of hire? Are we getting the best person? And not only that, what about the time to hire? You saved an agency fee, but I had to go 6 months without an employee in this seat. And these are the things that are costing. And eventually, in the not too distant future, CEOs and boards are going to sit back and go, you know what? We built this in-house function, but we're getting second division players into our team. Therefore, we're going to lose in the marketplace. And they will turn somewhere else, and that will be agencies, but only if those agencies have built systems to become world champions at finding talent. That's what I'd be doing if I owned a recruitment company, if I was running a recruitment company today, is I would be building a business I would go to a niche where there was a shortage. Sounds counterintuitive. I'd go there and I'd be the world champion at finding talent, and you wouldn't have to haggle fees ever again.
All right, so I think that's a good theme for us to take. We've got about 7-8 minutes left, Greg. Just a quick restart again. This is the hashtag RecHangout. We're talking with Greg Savage, and we're going everywhere from dark ages recruitment through to what the real future can be. The romance, the seduction that recruitment companies need to do with their candidates. And the headlines are going to be about that, Greg. It's going to be beautiful. I can't wait to see the picture of you and, one famous actress or another that Louise will put up on the front of the blog. But I think your point there, and I'm sure the question from our audience was going to be, okay, so what next? How do I actually become that champion? What do I need to do to go find that rare talent so I can be the rock star and that I can be that seductive, romantic partner of those candidates and of those customers? What have I got to do next, okay, Greg?
Right, I'll tell you. I just noticed from Louise that there's 6 minutes left, so you've given me 6 minutes to give the golden nugget. Here's the thing. If I was a desk recruiter, we've spoken a lot about owners, but if I was on the desk, my advice to you is you've got to become 2 things. One is a skills hunter, and the second is a talent magnet. Let me explain what I'm talking about. Both of these things, most recruiters are not. So we've got to become a skills hunter. We've got to become highly skilled. And I use the word hunter. take the image. A hunter is someone who leaves the home base, goes out into a forest or somewhere where there's no prey to be seen, but they come back with the prey, right? That's what recruiters have to be. They have to become very skilled at digital search. They've got to become very skilled at social media search. Most recruiters don't know how to use things like follow a wonk and how to search Twitter for candidates, how to search Facebook for candidates. So they've got to be highly proactive about going out and finding people. And they've also got to be skilled in phone sourcing. You know, the evidence is in. Phone sourcing, by that I mean picking up the phone and calling someone, is 3 times as effective as sending an in-mail or an email. And yet most recruiters go the other way. So you've got to be highly skilled at proactively going out and being a skills hunter. Teach yourself those skills. Most recruiters don't have it. They wait for candidates to come to them. And in England and in Australia and New Zealand, in America it's a little bit different. They headhunt a lot more and they recruit. For them the word recruit means to go and find someone. So we've got to become skills hunters. Then the other thing is you've got to become a talent magnet. Now that's the reverse. That's where, because of your brand, and I'm talking about an individual, you know, you can build a brand in your community or in your niche. If you're recruiting legal people in Wolverhampton or something, you can go on Twitter and you can follow every legal person in Wolverhampton and you can tweet legal stuff and build a brand in that world. And you can do it on LinkedIn. Here's something about LinkedIn. LinkedIn is going to become less of a sourcing platform and more of a branding platform. You should use it for branding. And if you become an expert brander on LinkedIn, the irony is it'll be your best sourcing platform because people will come to you. Most people use LinkedIn as a place to go and rape and pillage, and that's fine. But actually, if you used it engaging in groups, in blogging on their platform, which is free, in putting a status update every day, an interesting one, a relevant one, you would build a brand and attract people to you. And so those are the 2 things that we need to do. And you know, if you're an owner of a recruitment company, it applies to you too. You need to build a company full of skilled, highly sophisticated skills hunters, people who know how to go out and find candidates proactively using digital and social and everything else. And then on the branding side, that includes in real life branding, and that's all about candidate experience, which by the way is appalling in Australia and worse in the UK. And what we need to do there is to build a brand around how we treat people, you know, responding, giving them good advice, you know, age-old stuff, but it's been lost. And so that's what I'd be doing. If you want it in a nutshell, you've got to become a world champion skills hunter, and you've got to build a talent magnet force field around you, which attracts people to you through referrals, recommendations, word of mouth, your brand on social, your brand on LinkedIn. So I think it's now 1 minute to the end of the game.
Yeah, we're getting.
You might want me to stop talking.
No, but that's brilliant, Greg, and I would liken it to, if we have any of our, sometimes we have some Americans listening, Scott Boras is the biggest agent in American baseball. Why? Because he always gets the best deal for his clients. And so anybody who decides to move, they call him first because he is the talent magnet. And I'm sure it used to be Barry Hearn here in boxing and snooker, and you've got similar guys, I'm sure, in Australia. They make themselves into a brand that the candidates know about, and they go after them first. And I think that's an interesting position to try and get us into. Are you the rock star?
Well, Alan, I mean, sorry to interrupt you, but there are recruiters who have got that same brand equity. I've got friends, not me, but I've got friends who've been in the industry a long time who have done what I've talked about for so long. There's a mate of mine, Graham Whelan, in accounting recruitment in Australia, here in Sydney. Any finance director who's looking for a job in the city will go and speak to him. Yeah. Because he's a magnet because of quality, and he's not big on social media. He really is old school, but through quality and service and a repetitive word of mouth, he is a magnet for jobs. Yeah, and it's not only longevity, you know, it's quality. And so these are the messages that I'd be saying to people, you know. I guess I'd sum it up by saying this, you know, the old tactics are not going to be effective. Don't wait till the well runs dry before you think of new ways to engage with candidates. Do it now. Should have done it already, but do it now. Your clients are going to scream out. They already are screaming out in the UK. They're screaming out in New Zealand, where the economy is a lot better than here. And in some sectors, they're screaming out for candidates here too. And what recruiters are doing is putting ads up on job boards. I mean, for fuck's sake, you've got to be smarter than that.
Brilliant. Well, I think we've got some great themes that have come out of this today, Greg, and I can't wait to read Louise's blog. Romance, seduction, talent magnet. I see some great images coming up here. Really appreciate your time, investing your time today. Louis, I'm going to kick it back over to you as we reach a close in terms of what we're up to next. But again, a shout out and thanks to all of the guests who've been throwing some great comments in. I'm sorry we didn't get to all of you, but appreciate your input. Don't forget to watch the show on the replay and use social to actually push it out there. Go read The Savage Truth if you're not already reading it. Sign up to Greg's newsletter and read the comments. I think when I printed off the blog this morning, there was about 48 comments, and there was some really interesting stuff in the comments there too. So, Greg, again, thanks very much for your input. Louis, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Greg, and thank you all who commented. What I would say to anyone watching is there's a lot of other Hangouts. We've had a lot of good discussions around technology and around marketing and branding, especially early in the year where we had recruitment agencies, Interquest Group in particular, on the show, who were talking about what they were doing in the marketing and branding and bringing their recruitment business into the modern world, so to speak. So do check that out. They're following a lot of Greg's advice. In terms of our next Hangout, it's an appropriate follow-up. We're going to be talking about social recruiting, but not like we were talking about social recruiting 2 years ago, you know, the very basics, the Facebook page and so forth. We're going to be getting into social recruiting with Andy Hedworth and other guests and talking about process and technology and integrating a proper strategy, one that goes into your CRM, into your sales, into your marketing team. And Andy has actually just released a book called Social Media Recruitment: How to Successfully Integrate Your Social Media Strategy into your recruitment strategy. That is actually on the 27th of May at 1 p.m. BST, so do keep a lookout for that. After the show, I'll get back to you about next week when we transcribe this hour-long, all of Greg's best points on SlideShare in text format, so you can get through them really easily, share them with your loved ones and your friends, and you could share that with your colleagues. That'll be on SlideShare. I'll email that out to everyone who's signed up to this show. I want to do a little bit of a plug as well for something called the Recruiters Masterclass that we've organised in support of the Cystic Fibrosis Trust. We're doing this for a colleague at Colleague. We're doing 5 days of masterclasses online with 5 excellent recruitment experts, trainers. It's a £97 donation. Everything is going to the CF Trust. You can watch it in your office with your consultants or sources. And basically, if we get 104 registrations and we're halfway there, we would have raised £10,000 for the CF Trust goes directly to them and no cost at people's time. They've all been very generous. So if you want more information on that, please go to the Colleague blog. I think that's everything. Please do keep a lookout for the follow-up emails. There will be a recording. This will be on YouTube, so you can watch it again. Thank you very much, Greg. I suppose we'll let you get to bed now.
Yeah, it's 10 o'clock. So yeah, bedtime soon.
Great Hangout. I think there's most comments, most engagement we've ever had, actually. So fantastic. Thank you all. See you again next time.
Right.
Thank you very much.